treifus, and he was still from.
You're beautiful.
There's a block. That's all.
The only problem is that he would have a problem. He would have a problem.
Right.
The Friedrich Rebbe had a rule that if he wrote to a Jew, a Jewish man, he wrote Vav Vav Ches Aleph Yud Aleph. Vasik v'chosid Ishrei Elokim. Didn't matter who you were.
Right.
And the Rebbe had the same meaning. Whoever you were, you got Vasik.
Right.
So the Rebbe had relatives, Schneersons, who were proud of Kursim, very proud. So he got a letter from the previous Rebbe, Vasik v'chosid Ishrei Elokim. He says, "Befeinish nicht azay. I'm a kaifa beikir. I'm not a Yirei Shamayim." He was insulted. So the Rebbe. So there's two stories. One, so the Rebbe told him, "I'm looking at you as you're in your neshama."
Yeah.
But the one story was, he said to him, "Nicht durchklappen Semichkes und spielen Karten wird man ein Apokedes. Von dem wird man ein Bur. An Apokedes ist Shono u Piresh." You don't become an apokedes by playing cards and popping sesame seeds. That makes you into an empty head.
Right.
An apokedes learned and chose to go away. In other words, you're no apokedes.
Right.
You're no apokedes. Exactly. Shana, the Shana learned the whole Teiru. Pirish. Says you're no apokedes. Okay, l'chaim. L'chaim l'evrocha. Tzaddikim have an ability to see a Jew in a very different light, and they see good. And the tzaddikim one, we should also look at a Jew that way. Al Tabit Al Marei, right? The story in Tanakh with Shmuel Hanavi. What you see is not what is, and what is not what you see. Ayid. The Tareket von Ayid. Okay, the Eibishol, the Tayir Ayid, geb ma Tayir a gute Yor, betefen nir van Nigga. L'chaim, Gamatam, Suris Tevis, L'chaim L'chaim. I want to tell you Advatera. I want to tell you Advatera. Even from Parshat Shavua. But I want to preface. In 1990, Tov Nun, the Rebbe was the Rebbe for 40 years. So Yud Shvat, Tov Nun, Yud Shvat of 1990 was the 40th anniversary of the passing of the previous Rebbe, and it was the 40th anniversary of the Nesias of our Rebbe. So many people came to 770. For those who could remember, the Rebbe gave out the green Tanyas. Yud Shvat, remember the green, the Rebbe gave us a green Tanya. Everyone got a green Tanya from the Rebbe. The Rebbe came from the oil. 770 was packed. And in those times, there was no longer Farbrengens during the week, only on Shabbos. So the Rebbe spoke from his place in the front of the shul. And the Sikha started with the words, Vayehi bar boyim shana. The Rebbe opened the Sikha with the words. It was dramatic. Vayehi bar boyim shana. When the date of we have Nanach, Vayehi bar boyim shana. The Rebbe started the Sikha with the words, Vayehi bar boyim shana. He spoke about 40 years. In that Sikha, the Rebbe spoke extensively about an idea which you have in this week's Parsha, in Shvi, the Chtitas of Shabbos. That Moshe Rabbeinu called the Jewish people together. He says, Haskei Shema Yisrael. Listen to me, Jewish people. I remember all the words, but he gave them a speech. Moshe Rabbeinu was giving sermons. Moshe Rabbeinu was giving inspirational speeches. The Sefer Dvarim is Moshe Rabbeinu giving not halacha but musar to the Yidden. And he says to them, you saw the oisais and the meifsim and the nisyonis. You saw the wonders and the miracles and the tests. You saw them yourself. And then it says, the Eibusha did not give you. For 40 years, you wandered through the desert, your clothing didn't get frayed, and your feet didn't become fat, didn't become swollen from walking on the sand. You had food from heaven. Moshe Rabbeinu tells them all the goodies they had in the midbar. But until today, says Moshe Rabbeinu, you didn't have a heart that knows, an eye that sees, and a ear that hears until this day. Leiv ladas, einayim l'reis, v'znayim l'shmoy, ad hayom until this day. So Rashi has two very different interpretations on this pasuk. Very different interpretations. The first interpretation of Rashi is that Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Yidden, until this day I didn't trust you. Until this day I didn't trust you. Why? Because Moshe is about to pass away. So Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Sefer Torah. Right? The Gemara says there's a machlekes with the Megillas nichtava chasuma nitna, with the Torah written in little pieces and then pieced together, or was the whole Torah written at once. And the way you learn it in Chassidus, they're both true. Over the course of the 40 years, Moshe Rabbeinu taught them the halachas. They wrote a parsha. A parsha from a pay to a pay to a, the little spaces in the Chumash. At the end of the 40 years, they put it all together. There's a whole Chassidus on Megillas, and Chasuma Nitna, the Sefer Torah, as made up of little pieces, and how it becomes one unit. So at the end of the 40 years, the whole Sefer Torah was ready. It's complete. So Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the complete Sefer Torah, lock, stock, and barrel, from beginning to the end, and he gave it to Shevet Levi. So the Yidden come running and screaming and said, what's this? Tomorrow they're going to say that the Torah is theirs and not ours. The Jews protested. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu give the Torah to Shevet Levi? Because the halacha is, and it says in Chumash, Yedu mishpatecha leyankov t'raschol Yisrael. Shevet Levi, Kohanim and Leviim are supposed to be in the Sanhedrin. And if you learn the Gemara, and you learn the Mishnah, and you know history, more than half the Tanoim and the Amiroi were Kohanim and Leviim. They were all miyuchasim. They were very choshev Yidden. They came from Kohanim, Leviim, very choshev mishpachas. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes there to Shevet Levi because he figured they're going to be the teachers of Torah. They need the Torah, and the rest of the Jews complained that they're going to say that it's only theirs. So Moshe wrote 12 more Sifrei Torah. The Gemara says that the day he passed away, but the day he passed away was Shabbos. So he wrote it Friday, with Pashtus. Vovoder. 12 Sifrei Torah Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, and he gave it to each Shevet. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, after 40 years, now I know that you're in. Now I know that you're not just doing it because there's some kind of a reward, because this protest was for Moshe Rabbeinu personally unbelievably heartening. Instead of being insulted, he was delighted that the Yidden wanted that Hashem should. This is the first shot on this pasuk. But there's a second shot. The Gemara says, if you have a Rebbe, a teacher, who teaches you Torah, it takes 40 years to reach Seif Daita, to understand what your Rebbe says till the end. Derech Agav, parenthetically, it's the Yom Haledes of the Alter Rebbe. It's Alter Rebbe's birthday. So I'll tell you a word which is brought in Sfarim, not in the Sichos, but from Chassidim, by the Alter Rebbe. That the Alter Rebbe said about himself. He spoke in Yiddish. The Gemara sagt, Adar boim shnin lekoyim inish daita der Rabbe, ba'mire des neskaim geworden boi b'yoyim. The Gemara says it takes 40 years to understand what your teacher understands the way your teacher understands it. I reached that the same day. Alter Rebbe said about himself, I heard a Torah from my Rebbe before the sun set. I knew it like he knows it. But the Gemara says it takes 40 years to be Yered the Seif Daita Shel Rabbi. To understand what your teacher understands, the way he understands it, takes 40 years. So Hashem, until today, you could say that the Torah wasn't yours, it was mine. Because you didn't understand it. You heard it, you studied it, but the 40 years are up. And from now on, you're going to be held accountable, because after 40 years, you already have the Leiv Ladas, you already have the Einayim L'Reis, you already have the Einayim L'Shmoya. So Eibush is going to hold you accountable for keeping or not keeping the Torah, because now you understand, the Torah is yours. So when the Rebbe's, and a verse of the Rebbe's 40th year of the Rebbe, so the whole winter of 1989, 1990, the Rebbe was quoting this pasuk, and the Gemara over and over again. Now we have Arboim Shono, Leiv Ladas. The Rebbe Bechlal, his style was, he would pick on something, and he would talk about it ad infinitum, talk about it endlessly, and then just stop and move on to something else. That was the Rebbe's approach to everything. So the Rebbe talked about it months, every Farbrengen, Leiv Ladas. Here's a sweet little story, a Sheina Maaseh. A kid said, there was a Yid whose name was Rabbi Shia Korf, the Pinya's father. Rabbi Shia Korf died at the 107. He missed his stop. he forgot to get off the train. 100. He went around twice. He's Marech Yom. Everyone talking about Mendel Marozov and Yudel Chitrik. Shia Korf was Marech Yom, and he went closer. He got Rabbi Shia Korf apparently, he was the guy in the matzah bakery. He was the nervous, angry guy in the matzah bakery. It was his bakery. He was a big Yiddish Shamayim. But at Yent Lenin, he was a Talmud Chacham. And he had a very unusual relationship with the Rebbe. He started to study Tanya, and he would ask the Rebbe questions. So every single note or sikha from the Rebbe on Tanya, the Rebbe sent him a copy. And he published the first commentaries on Tanya that came out post-Holocaust, before all the other books were his. And most of it was the Rebbe's own notes. The Rebbe would send him copies of everything he spoke on Tanya, because he was apparently a real Jew, a chassid, a Yerei Shemaim. He was Pinya's father. You know, what else do you want? So Shir Karf was a shadar. That meant he traveled around raising money for the Rebbe. But a shadar doesn't mean a fundraiser. A shadar is a person, as the expression for the middle Rebbe is, Zein Ruchnius and Schneiden Geich. A shadar is a chassid. The most important thing he brings to town is himself. And he inspires people, he moves people, and he also raises money. A shadar is a very special denotation. It's considered like a very high level of proximity to the Rebbe. There was a lot of shluchim, but there were not that many shadarim. You know, Rabbi Reichik was a shadar. Rabbi Tzin Shem Tov was called a shadar. You look in the Rebbe's Iglis, shadar. Rabbi Shir Korf was a shadar. He traveled for the Rebbe from Maimed. The people who were shadarim would go in, when they came back from their trip, would visit different people. They would raise money. They'd bring it into the Rebbe, but they had to also take the names of the people who gave them the money, their wives and their children and their families. So when you came back from your shlichus, it took you weeks to prepare the documents that you needed to present to the Rebbe. When you were finished, you would go into the Rebbe's room and give the Rebbe the notes and the money. This was during a time that the Rebbe was no longer having a chidus. The Rebbe didn't see people privately. But the Bashir Karf, whenever he traveled as a fundraiser for the Rebbe, when he came back, would get to go into the Rebbe, and he would present the Rebbe with all this, with the names of the people who gave the tzedakah and their families and the tzedakah. There's a policy about shadaros, which goes back many generations. That the Rabbeim would not allow somebody to raise money on their behalf unless they got 1%. You had to be paid. It was a kavan dafke. If someone volunteered to be a shadar, the Rebbe said, no, you have to be paid. So the Rebbe told the Bashir Karf, if you're going to be a shadar, you have to take 1%. And believe me, he didn't give you 49%. If you wanted to make money, the last place you wanted to work was Chadakov. I think they gave you 15%, and you waited 15 years and 15 ulcers till you saw the money. You didn't get rich. But ask the Reichik, you'll hear the whole story. But the Rebbe wanted, if you worked for him at the Shadar, you had to be paid. It was a policy. Rabbi Shir Korf had a matzah bakery. He wasn't poor. He didn't need the Rebbe's money. He didn't want the Rebbe's money. So he told the Rebbe, I'm going to do it as a volunteer. So the Rebbe said to him, if you're going to be a volunteer Shadar, I'm firing you. It's a policy. If you don't get paid, you can't work. So he told the Rebbe should pay me in the Ruchnias. The Rebbe should pay me with spiritual gifts, spiritual largesse. I heard the story from the opinion by when he was sitting shiva for his father. The Nocham, when he from the mikvah, it itself Nocham. No, this is a Genoya Maisi, this is true. So the Rebbe said, okay, you want me to pay you in Ruchnias? The Rebbe's got plenty of Ruchnias, right? And the good thing about Ruchnias is it's not like dollars, it's replenishable, it's a renewable resource. So the Rebbe said, what do you want? So it was around the time that the Rebbe was talking about this, Leiv Ladas, Einayim L'reis, Einayim L'shmaya. So he told the Rebbe, I want that the Rebbe should give me Leiv Ladas, Einayim L'reis, Einayim L'shmaya. And the Rebbe says, whoa. How much money did you raise? You want all of that for the 15 cents that you just collected? The Rebbe says, you're asking for an awful lot. So he tells the Rebbe, you know what? I'll take one of them. Okay, I don't need all three. I'll take one of them. So the Rebbe says, nah. You asked, don't back off. On the one hand, the Rebbe told him, what kind of chutzpah you're asking for all this stuff? And you know what? Good. Chutzpah is good. This is the story. I heard this from the opinion. This is an interesting story. And Medav Zogen, the Rebbe gave him Leiv Ladas, Einayim L'reis. Rabbi Shir Karf, at the end of his life, you didn't see him around much. He was in his home. His head worked and he was sitting and learning, but he didn't see him in shul. But Mistame, if the Rebbe gave him Leiv Ladas, Einayim L'reis, those are pretty good gifts to get from the Rebbe. Anyway, this is the story. I want to discuss the idea of Leiv Ladas, Einayim L'reis, Einayim L'shmaya. Ubagdam. I want to tell you another story. When they came to arrest the Alter Rebbe ran away. Everybody, it says in the Beis Rebbe, this is a famous story. When they came to arrest the Alter Rebbe ran away. And he left Luzhny. Was living in Luzhny. He left Luzhny and he went across a river to a nearby town, whatever it was, Krasnaya, some people say Chaslavich, I don't know what. And he hid. He hid in the town. They went looking for him, they couldn't find him. I don't know if you know this, Rabbi Yoshe ben Soloveitchik, the Rav from Yeshiva University, always used to say that his father, the Moshe Soloveitchik, was a real misnagid. Not that he was a misnagid that he hated Chassidim. He was a misnagid that he had no use for Chassidus. He was strict halacha, strict, cold, rational Judaism. And he was a Rav in a Chassidish Stadt. He was a Rav in Chaslavich. Chaslavich was the city of only Chassidim. So how come you have a misnagid in a Chassidish city? So I heard a tape of the Rav telling the story himself. That the Rav of Chaslavich was a Fabissin misnagid. The Rav of Chaslavich was a hateful misnagid who used to sit shiva when someone became a chassid then. And according to the Soloveitchik, so the Brisker version, the Alter Rebbe ran away, this just went off, the Alter Rebbe ran away, he ran to Chaslavich. So he ran to Chaslavich. It's on. He went to Chaslavich. And they went looking for him. Whatever they were called then, the KGB, the NKVD, whatever they were called in Tsarist Russia, went looking for him. So the Alter Rebbe had to hide
Can you turn on the light again?
The Alter Rebbe had to hide in a place. The Alter Rebbe had to hide in a place that the police would not look for him. Where? In the house of the biggest misnagid. So he came to the Chaslavich Rav, who was a Fabissin misnagid. There was a Talmud of the Vilna Gaon. Then it was a war, and he hid the Alter Rebbe. The police came to the house. They knocked on the door. They asked if Zalman Baruchovich is here. No, Zalman Baruchovich. Are you? He would never come to this house. I would give him up in a heartbeat. Anyway, he protected the Alter Rebbe. So the Chassidim of Chaslavich made a takana that the Rav will always be a misnagid. So the Chassidish city with a Litvish Rav. Rabbi Yoshe ben was also a misnagid, but he got a full diet of Chassidus as a child, to the chagrin of his father, because he had the Chassidish Malamdim and so on and so forth. And if you've ever listened to his tapes and read his books, he was not a chassid. Rabbi Yoshe ben was not a chassid. He was certainly a litvak, but he was very touched by Chassidus because of his childhood. Anyway, so the story was, now the Rebbe ran away from the government. They were trying to arrest him. So he came to some city, whatever, Krasnaya, Chaslavich, I don't know which, and he hid in a motel. And the Shmuel Munkes, was Alter Rebbe's Chassidim, came to be with him. Everyone thinks the Shmuel Munkes is a comic, as a letza, batchan, as a Shmuel Munkes. I had a malamid, ich habe gehabt a malamid, der geheißen Hara Fuchs, Shmuel Tzvi Fuchs. He taught me Masechta Bava Basra in Tov Shin Lamed Vov. It's a long time ago, 46 years ago. I was 10 years old. Rabbi Fuchs knew Bava Basra Balpeh, Gemara, Rashbam, Teisvis, Os Ba'os, cover to cover. He used to put his finger on the word, turn 100 daf, and tell you what was underneath his finger. I watched it. Rabbi Fuchs. And he was such a humble man, it was disgusting. He was the sweetest Jew I ever met. He was incredibly, when I was married with children already, anytime he would see me in the street, he would stop and tell me a story. So Rabbi Fuchs told me that he personally was at a Farbrengen at Farbrengen Rebbe, the previous Rebbe in Poland before the war, where the previous Rebbe said, quote, Amezok Shmuel Munkes Meg Mezog Rebbe at Gad Gili Eliyahu. When you say Shmuel Munkes, it's okay to say Reb Shmuel Munkes. Eliyahu Hanavi would visit him. You understand? Eliyahu. So Shmuel Munkes was no comic. The comedy was the cover. He was a big chassid. He was a big oivet. He was a gadol b'yisrael. He was Adam gadol. The Rebbe's Rishimis, there's details about Shmuel Munkes' life that are very remarkable. Eliezer and Garai made a book on Shmuel Munkes, and he did something most unmodern. He only put the true stories in the book, not all the made-up ones. He only puts those the good sources. It's a small little booklet, but you can buy it. Anyway, so the Shmuel Munkes came to the Alter Rebbe in this Krechme where he was hiding. And this is very famous. The Alter Rebbe said to Shmuel Munke, Shmuel, was trachte? Ich soll sich lassen arrestieren. Shmuel, what do you think? I should allow myself to be arrested and taken away? So Shmuel Munke says, yeah, I think you should go back to Lajne and be arrested and taken away. So the Alter Rebbe says to him, but it's Pekuach Nefesh. I'm putting my life, they could kill me. And Api Halacha, Api Nigla, Api Din, you're not allowed to put yourself in a Makom Sakana. Right? It's not only you're not allowed to get killed, you're allowed to be in a place where it's possible. Or you're not allowed to be in a Kaisel Ru'ua, you're not allowed to go into a Khurba. A person is not allowed to put themselves wantonly and intentionally and deliberately in a dangerous Mamid Matzav. So if I go back, it's dangerous. And Shmuel Munke said, Alter Rebbe, I think you should go anyway. But Alter Rebbe argues with him. He says, listen, I have an eitzah. I'm hiding here. I can run off to Germany, to Western Europe. They'll never be able to get me, and I'll live my life. And Shmuel Munke says, no, you need to go back and get arrested. So Alter Rebbe says, what about the idea that it's sakonis nefashos, it's dangerous? So Shmuel Munke said famously, bist du a Rebbe, wird ich kein Keul nicht schatten? Bist du nicht kein Rebbe in der Shimis des Dats? Bist du wert a Keul? Wer dir geben Schuss zuzunehmen bei Zentike Teus der Yidden a Geschmack in El Mazet. This is the quote, which means, if you're a Rebbe, a bullet is not going to hurt you, and there's rather mice with the Baditche Verov and the Schwarze Hund and the Burim, which says exactly that. When a guy shot at the Rebbe, the gun misfired. Say when he lowered the gun, as soon as it came next to where his dog was, boom, he shot his dog dead. Don't ask. He shot at the Baditche Verov, and the gun didn't go off. So he lowered the gun, and his dog was sitting at his feet, and he killed the dog. If you're a Rebbe, a bullet's not going to hurt you. And if you're not a Rebbe, you deserve a bullet. That's the Shmuel Munke told the Rebbe. Who gave you the right to deprive tens of thousands of Jews of the pleasures of this world? What does that story mean? The Alter Rebbe, they took away pleasures of this world from times around the world. In adult Alter Rebbe, that wouldn't happen. So this is how I understand it. A Rebbe is a machadish. Every Rebbe makes new ideas, not just new Torah, new avodah, a new way of serving the Eibishter. When the Rebbe introduces his new way, it's novel, it's different, it's strange, it's not mainstream, it's not cultural, so it's very uncomfortable. The Rebbe comes up with his new ideas. Some people follow, and many people shy away. They don't want to be different. They don't want to be weird. In our generation, I'm a little bit young for this, but you can ask my father, Zol Gesund sein. When the Rebbe started to do his thing, the old Hasidim could not find a big enough rock to hide under, because it was ruining the whole Lubavitch. It was ruining the whole Lubavitch. The Lubavitch that they knew from the old country, the Rebbe changed it all, in every way. Number one, the Rebbe was all into energy and joy. He wasn't into the intense Russian stuff. Simcha, conquering the world. And the old Chassidim, I've heard this from people. The old Chassidim were very great. They were really big Chassidim. And a lot of them were big Talmidei Chachamim. And they used to make fun of the Bachrim. But the Bachrim were cracked. And the Bachrim were doing what the Rebbe wanted. So there was this war, and it wasn't a cold war, it was kind of hot, where the Bacharim felt that the older Chassidim were not respecting the Rebbe. And the older Chassidim felt that the Bacharim were acting like a bunch of idiots. When in fact, the idiocy that the Bacharim were acting out was what the Rebbe wanted. Ichke Gansburg lived in Etzisrael. Ichke Gansburg lived in Etzisrael. He worked for the Rebbe from day one, mamish, from day one. And he was a character, wow. So, the Agudas Chabad in Etzisrael wrote the Rebbe a letter. The leadership of Lubavitch, that there's one young guy running around Israel embarrassing the name of Lubavitch, and his name is Yitzchak Gansberg, and you got to stop him. So the Rebbe writes back, there's one guy in all of Israel who's doing what I want, and you saying he's embarrassed the name of Lubavitch. That's how bad it was. The older Chassidim did not understand what the Rebbe was doing, and most importantly, they didn't understand why. They were used to a very different Lubavitch. So the kids, the Bacharim, they bought in. The elder had a hard time. And the truth is, so it was a very big issue. It was very unpleasant. Because the elder Chassidim were honorable men. And when they were making fun of the kids, they were literally making fun of the Rebbe. It's a different world. that world is now normal, now mainstream. There are new crazinesses that people are struggling with, but this is what happens when a Rebbe comes along and introduces new ideas. Right? I was once giving a talk someplace at some Chabad house, and the guy says, "I need a cliche. I need a chap. You can't just say you're going to speak about the Rebbe. I need a chap." So the chap is, I said, write on your paper the Rebbe who changed everything so that nothing at all should change. And that's really the truth. The Rebbe changed so many in Yonim. Chassidus, so that Chassidus should remain intact. I work in yeshiva, and one of the people I have the good fortune to work with is Bistrol Lapkowski, Eshana ben Shmeinim. So is a big, you learned by him, he's a big Talmid Chacham, he's a Yirei Shamayim, not from this world. But he's French. I married a Nemenov. I married a Nissan's granddaughter. So he told me once that he remembers the first time that Nissan went to the Rebbe. It was Toshin Tezvav, 1954. The Nissan came back, and Yisrael was Masama Bar Mitzvah age, or even before Bar Mitzvah. And he said that Reb Nissan came back very bewildered, moved. And his statement was, the Rebbe will was al alles tam besimcha. A viele tshuva. V'yazei weiß ich nicht, aber der Rebbe will was al alles tam. Reb Nissan was such an intense chassid. And he comes back from the Rebbe, he says, I don't know how, but the Rebbe wants whatever we do, including tshuva, we should do with joy. So he struggled with it. Because he had an emes of Mesiras Nefesh, which he had for half a century, 50 years of his life. And the Rebbe wasn't going away from those things, but the Rebbe was translating him into a language which works in America, and they had a very hard time with it. So if you're a chassid, that means that you got on the ground floor. You know, a Johnny come lately, right? After everybody loves the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you love the Lubavitcher Rebbe, thank you very much. It's when nobody loves the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You understand that? The Bacharim and the Chassidim, the first Shluchim who went on Shlichus in the 50s and in the 60s, when the Lubavitchers didn't want to go on Shlichus. That was a big deal. It was hard in every way, including they didn't have so much success. Today, it's the coolest thing in the world. I'm not chas v'sholom trying to trivialize what Shlichus is, but you cannot compare the Mesiras Nefesh. Every Rebbe introduces new ideas to the world, and some follow. Over time, it's mainstreamed, and everybody follows. But at that point, it's a kleine kunst. It's not a big deal. And that's what the Shmuel said to the Alter Rebbe. Shmuel Munkus Alter Rebbe. You know what a Rebbe does? Takes people, ruins their life. How? By giving them Yiddishkeit. Yeah, but everybody else has Yiddishkeit also. No. But you give a Yiddishkeit that's not comfortable. You give Yiddishkeit that's condemned. You give Yiddishkeit that nobody else trusts. Why? Because you're creating something new. In 50 years from today, in 100 years from today, this is going to be the new normal. But right now, to buy into this way of life is not to have a life. You understand? That's how I understand what the Shmuel Munker said. You deprived so many Jews from Elam Hazeh. You know what Elam Hazeh was? Sitting day and night and learning Gemara. That was Elam Hazeh. That's pretty religious. But that was mainstream. What the Alter Rebbe was introducing was different. And it was very hard to follow because you were automatically a pariah. You were a Meshuggah. You were different. You understand? And this is in each, you look at the history of Chassidim, not just Chabad. I have a son who's a cosmopolitan chassid. So he bought a book called Hasaraf. It's a book on the Mendele Kotzker, the Kotzker Rebbe. I was always wanted to read the Kotzker Rebbe. It's sitting on my night table, and I'm reading about the Mendele Kotzker. You heard of the Kotzker Rebbe, yeah? The Kotzker Rebbe was an unbelievably intense man. Wow. What psychology would do to him, I can't even tell you. He was a very big tzaddik. He was unbelievably intense. He wanted everything to be perfect always. Your learning Nigle should be like it's the only thing in the world. You're learning Chassidus, you're davening at the highest level, and one is not allowed to be at the expense of the other. He wanted everything to be heard. He lived this way, and he had a following. The Kotzker Rebbe was very successful. People who were so intense. I read a story the other day. There was a Yid, a big Talmud Chacham, a big Talmud Chacham, who came to Kotsk. So when he came to Kotsk, he started to daven. And because he started to daven, his learning became a little less intense. So the Kotzker Rebbe, the Mendele Kotzker, tells him, I want to ask you a question. The expression for knowing how to learn in Gemara is Mila Kreise Shasu Poskim. You fill your belly with Gemara and Poskim. Why not Mila Moiche Shasu Poskim? Why Mila Kreise? The Kotzker Rebbe, the Mendele Kotzker, asked his Talmud of his, why does the Gemara's expression for knowing a lot of Torah, you fill your stomach? He says, because your stomach every day is hungry, needs to eat some more. If you're not hungry for Torah, you have no business in Kotsk, so he told me. You learned the whole Shas. It was a very big Talmud Chacham. So he said, okay, in other words, as much as this person could learn, and as much as this person wanted to daven, the Kotzker wanted that the learning shouldn't suffer, and the davening everything should be perfect. The most intense man. And they always put him in Chedim, you know that? The Chassidish Rebbes got together, because he was a revolutionary. He was a troublemaker. It's 3 generations of troublemakers. There was a very famous Rebbe called the Choyzim Lublin, the Lubliner. He was a very big Rebbe with thousands and thousands of Chassidim. One of his own rebelled against him, opened up his own shop during his Rebbe's lifetime. He was called the Yid HaKadosh, the Yud HaKadosh in Peshischa, they called him. The reason they called him the Yid HaKadosh is because he had the same name as his Rebbe, Yitzchak Yankiv. So they didn't want to call him by his name, called the Yid HaKadosh. He actually passed away before the Lubliner. Why did he go away from Lublin? Because the Lubliner Rebbe was a big Rebbe. And you had all kinds of people, including what we would call today Chabad light. Everybody was welcome, and he was nice to everybody. And the Peshischa, the Yid felt that this is not Chassidus. Chassidus has to be intense and precise. And that. So when the Yid HaKadosh passed away, his Malam Okum was Rabbunim in Peshischa, Rebbe Rabbunim, so Rabbunim in Peshischa. And after him was the Kotzker Rebbe. And he had hundreds of Talmidim. They were G'daylim, Mamish. The Kotzker Rebbe created the generation of giants. Really. They all became big Rebbes after him. So one of the Chassidim of the Lubliner asked the Kotzker Rebbe, why did you have to change everything? The Lubliner had a derech, there was a Chassidus from before, why do you have to change everything? So the Kotzker Rebbe answered him, Minei Obey. Why did the Baal Shem Tov have to change everything? There was Yiddishkeit before Baal Shem Tov. People learned Torah, people did mitzvahs, people studied Mussar. Why did Chassidus? What's the answer? That it's possible that you get stale. It becomes so habitual, so mechanical, it loses its luster, its energy. It's called mitzvahs anoshim alubas pasuk, where the whole thing becomes just meaningless acts. So the Baal Shem Tov came along to take away this mitzvah anoshim alubas and replace it with an energy. And you know what? The Baal Shem Tov could get stale. So he brought along a Kotzker, he probably said the Peshischa Rebbe, the Peshischa, the Lubliner, the Kotzker, to freshen it up. Every Rebbe freshens up Yiddish, that's what he does. It's not a different religion, but somehow a Rebbe creates around him a following of people that they live in. Their Yiddishkeit has a credibility, has an emes. But the cost for that is that you're a pariah. That you're a weirdo, that you're a meshuggah, you're not b'teichami, you're not part of Klal Yisrael, all of these foolish illusions. And that's called tsunem ba'yid nagashmak and. But after time passes, what was before unusual, or before an anomaly, becomes regular, becomes mainstream. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Yid. For 40 years to be a Jew, you had to be a meshuggah. For 40 years to follow the Torah. Imagine you come out of Mitzrayim and Moshe comes to you and says, from now on, every day you're going to put on tefillin. Okay, so they go home, they find animal skins there. 3 days later, from now on, you're going to put a mezuzah on your door. Okay, when does it finish? Every 3 days, nach a mitzvah, nach a minig, nach a din, my God. And everything Moshe Rabbeinu says is not a joke. It's a deraisa. The Chazal said, Rashi brings in the Chumash, that when they left Har Sinai, the Jews said, no more, enough. How many mitzvahs? Every 2 days you have another one. Noch a mitzvah, noch a mitzvah, noch a mitzvah, noch a mitzvah, noch a mitzvah. And every time you start doing something new, you're not accustomed to it. You don't do it every day. You have to make yourself do it. You have to be in the right mindset. You have to concentrate, pay attention. But over time, it's integrated. The crazy becomes normal. And that's what it says in this parsha. Until today, Moshe is talking to the Yid of the first generation, to be a Yid was a Mesiras Nefesh. Not anymore. Now it's just life. So long as it's a Mesiras Nefesh, you could say, you know what, it's hard for me. I'm having a hard day. I really can't be made fun of today by the normal people. But at some point, the crazy becomes normal. And when the crazy becomes normal, the Eibusha says, what's your excuse now? And that's the pshat in these words. Until this day, being frum meant you had to be different. Today, this is the new normal. So there's a demand. And I think in Lubavitch, this is true, you know. Lubavitch, 70 years, 72 years, yeah? Most of the Jewish world has kind of realized that Lubavitch was still Jews. We're still Orthodox, practice the same Shabbos, the same kosher, the same matzah and Pesach, right? For a long time, we were looked at as, who are those people? I don't trust them. Why? Because they're different. So, different, they say bad. No, I don't trust them. Time passes. So in one way, it's a good thing because everything becomes normal. But in another way, it creates a whole new challenge. When being a chassid, and whatever it is that makes us into chassidim, becomes normal, the challenge becomes, where is the freshness? Where is the edge? Where's the Mesiras Nefesh? Where is the going out of yourself? This is a subtext. In other words, it's underneath the words that Moshe is saying. Moshe is saying, on the one hand, you should know until now, if you said you had a bad day, the Eibusha would forgive you because all of this is so novel. You should know that from now on, that excuse you do not have, this is mainstream. But he's saying something else also. And the something else is, when it becomes so integrated that being frum, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about. Poshet Shmiras HaMitzvos. In Leiv Ladas, Einayim L'Reis, as Nayim L'Shmei, Adayim Hazeh. Now it becomes a full-time job to make it fresh, to make it original, to make it have meaning. Okay, that's my Dvatera. I want to say something in the Parsha. In other words, it's not just a philosophy. There's a message, there's a practical message. Okay, we're going to say the